Okay, this lesson is on how to use the midpoint formula, which is to find the midpoint of a line segment using only the coordinates of the ends of the line segment. So we're not actually going to need to graph. So to define a line segment, we need the coordinates of 2 points, okay? So we generally call these x1 for our first point, y1. X1, Y1. So that would be one end of our point. The second point, which I will do in another colour over here, we would call X2 to differentiate from our first point, X1, and Y2. So the little 2's denote the second point, the little 1's denote the first point. Now our midpoint formula which can be found in your textbook goes something like this. Now what they actually do is when we're graphically looking at our midpoints, we figure out what is halfway, what's the halfway point horizontally using our x coordinates, and what is the halfway point vertically using our y coordinates. Now a very fast way of finding the exact middle of two different points is just to find the mean or the average. So our mean formula is to add up all the points and then divide by how many points there are. Now because we're talking about 2 points, x1, y1 being our first point, x2, y2 being our second, we only have to add 2 points and then we divide by 2. So our midpoint formula is this. So to find the x coordinate of the midpoint, okay, so if our midpoint was this, let's call it x m comma y m. If that was our midpoint, xm would be found by adding up the x coordinates of our first point and the x coordinate of our second point and then dividing by 2. For y, the y coordinate, ym for our midpoint would be equal to y1 plus y2 divided by how many points there are, which is 2. Okay, so this is a sort of strung out version of our midpoint formula, which you can find a shortened version of on page 223 of your textbook. Now if I was to use this for an example, let's say I had point 1, I will do in red over here as an example. Ooh. Cancel that, go away. I'm learning to use my software, sorry guys. So if we had 1 point, let's say it was 2, 3, that was point 1, and we had point 2, which I will write, let's make it green, make it stand out. 2, 3, let's say point 2 was 4, let's go 9. All right, so this is the first point over here. This is the second point. What we would do to find the midpoint xm, ym, we're going to find the x coordinate first. So xm the midpoint x coordinate would be equal to x1 plus x2 and then divide by 2. So we're going to go x1, which is 2, plus x2 in green, which is 4, and we are going to divide by how many points we're adding together because we're basically finding a mean here. Divide that by 2. Okay, so 2 plus 4 gives me 6. 6 divided by 2 is equal to 3. Now, if we think about this logically, what number is halfway between 2 and 4? It should be 3, and that's the answer that we got. So this will always work for you algebraically. You don't need to think too hard about it. Let's go ahead and find the y coordinate now. So ym would be equal to, change my color to red, and find my cursor again, goodness me. The y1 coordinate, which as we can see above is 3, plus y2 coordinate, I'll do in green because that's the green point that we've got up there, 3 plus 9, and that's going to be divided by 2. Divide by 2. Okay, so that's part of our formula. Now, if you have a think while I do this, what point would be halfway between 3 and 9? So I know that there's 6 spaces between 3 and 9, so I would think it's 3 spaces away from 3 and 9, which would be 6. So that's the answer I'm expecting if I was to do that graphically in my head. But let's add them together. 3 plus 9 gives me 12, divided by 2, and 12 divided by 2 is equal to 6, which is what I was expecting if I did it graphically in my head. So the answer is my midpoint would be equal to, we write it as a set of coordinates, so we need to make sure we have our bracket, would be our xm coordinate 3, comma, our ym coordinate 6. Okay, so that would be the midpoint here of these two coordinates, 2, 3 and 4, 9.